The courtroom was silent, but tension filled the air like a gathering storm. Detective Maya Lawson sat at the defendant's table, her callous hands clenched into fists beneath the polished wood. Her deep brown eyes burned with unyielding determination as she stared up at the woman who had orchestrated her downfall. Judge Margaret Sinclair. Detective Lawson, the judge began, her voice slick with false sweetness. It appeared that you found yourself on the wrong side of the law. Such a pity. Maya didn't flinch. She had spent over a decade cleaning the streets of the corruption that had swallowed her childhood whole. Now, that same corruption had painted her as a villain. I have nothing to say, Maya said coolly, her voice steady despite the injustice suffocating her. Really? Sinclair arched a perfectly manicured brow. Not even a plea? A declaration of innocence. Maya met her gaze without hesitation. The truth speaks for itself. A smirk curled Sinclair's lips as she picked up her gavel. The truth, she mused, as if the word was foreign to her. Let me tell you the truth, detective. You are nothing more than a disgrace to your badge, and I have no qualms about ensuring you never tarnish again. Before she could bring down the gavel, the courtroom doors burst open. A woman in a tailor gray suit strode in, her every step exuding authority. Special Prosecutor Rachel Delgado. She held up a thick file. Your Honor, she said, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. I have here irrefutable evidence proving that Detective Lawson was framed. Furthermore, she continued, her sharp gaze locking onto Sinclair, I have documented proof of your involvement in an elaborate scheme of judicial corruption, bribery, and obstruction of justice. The courtroom erupted into murmurs. Maya exhaled, the weight on her chest beginning to lift. Sinclair's face paled. This is outrageous, she snapped. I am the law. Rachel Delgado stepped forward. No, Judge, she said, her voice unwavering. The law is bigger than you. A bailiff hesitated before stepping toward the bench. His gaze shifted between the warrant in Delgado's hand and the judge who had once commanded his loyalty. Your Honor, he said stiffly, please stand. Sinclair's hands trembled. You don't understand. The cold click of handcuffs silenced her protest. Maya stood, rolling her shoulders as the chains that had threatened to break her began to loosen. She turned to Delgado, her expression unreadable. How long have you been watching? Delgado smiled. Long enough to know you don't belong on that side of the bench. As Maya stepped out of the courthouse into the warm evening air, she knew one thing for certain. Her fight wasn't over. Corruption still thrived in the shadows, but now she wasn't fighting alone. And this time, she wouldn't just survive. She would win. 1 week later, Maya Lawson sat across from her captain, her badge once again resting on her chest. The precinct that once turned its back on her now seemed unsure how to welcome her back. Some colleagues still cast wary glances in her direction, ashamed of how quickly they had believed the lies. Others, like Captain Harris, looked at her with cautious optimism. You up for another case? He asked, sliding a file toward her. Maya picked it up, flipping to the pages. Another missing girl. Another case no one else wanted to touch. She looked up, her resolve solid. Always. The details were grim. Jasmine Fields, 17, vanished from her neighborhood 2 weeks ago. Like the others before her, the case had barely made the news. But Maya knew the pattern too well. Young girls disappearing from the city's poorest neighborhoods, their cases buried under red tape and silence. She tapped her fingers against the file. Any leads? Captain Harris hesitated. There's one name that keeps coming up, a known trafficker with deep connections. Leon Vargas. Maya's jaw tightened. Vargas had been untouchable for years, slipping through cracks every time they got close. If he was involved, it meant the corruption in the justice system was even deeper than she thought. She stood. I'll find her. Captain Harris exhaled. Be careful, Lawson. You just got your life back. Maya smirked. That's exactly why I'm not letting this go. The investigation led Maya deep into the underbelly of the city. She spent days knocking on doors, piecing together Jasmine's last movements. Every clue pointed back to Vargas, but without solid evidence, the law was still on his side. Then came the break. An informant. A frightened woman who refused to give her name slipped a flash drive into Maya's hand. "It's all there," she whispered before vanishing into the night. Maya plugged the drive into her laptop, her pulse hammering as video files loaded onto the screen. Surveillance footage, financial records, and most damning of all, a recording of Vargas in a meeting with Judge Sinclair. Her stomach twisted, even in handcuffs. Sinclair's influence hadn't faded. She grabbed her phone. "Delgado, we have a problem." The prosecutor's voice was grim. "Meet me in an hour." Maya and Delgado convened in a dimly lit warehouse, sifting through the evidence. It was worse than they imagined. The operation was bigger, reaching higher into the legal system. "They're still protecting her," Delgado muttered, fury burning in her eyes. Maya clenched her fists. "Then we burn them down." With the evidence in hand, they coordinated with federal agents, preparing for a takedown. That night, as Vargas and his penthouse, the doors burst open. Agents swarmed the room, handcuffs glinting in the dim light. Maya stepped forward, her badge gleaming. "You're done, Vargas." His smirk faltered as Delgado handed him the warrant. "You have the right to remain silent," she said. "Not that it'll help you now." The arrest sent shockwaves through the city. Judge Sinclair, Vargas, and a dozen others faced charges ranging from human trafficking to judicial corruption. Maya stood outside the courthouse, the weight of justice finally settling on her shoulders. Delgado joined her, crossing her arms. "Feels good, doesn't it?" Maya nodded. "It's not over. There are more out there." Delgado smirked. "Then let's keep going." As Maya walked away, the city stretched out before her. Justice was never silent. Justice never slept. And neither would she.